Okay, let's talk about the next step in our progression with ethical hacking. Previously, we talked about scanning. We talked about the EC Council's methodology for scanning. Real quickly, not going to go through that over again. Lots of video on the website, lots of videos on YouTube. But real quickly, we basically, step one or phase one, we look for life. We try to discover life. Step two, we look for any kind of open ports that might be on there. We want to be stealthy. That's part three. Perform any kind of banner grabbing, fingerprinting, find out what those operating systems, those particular operating systems may be, scan for any vulnerabilities, map the network, and then eventually try to be not eventually, but throughout this whole process, we're trying to be as quiet as possible. We're trying to hide our tracks. We're trying to obfuscate information that we're gathering and stuff like that. Now, with that scanning methodology, we have to keep in remembering that we really haven't done anything that could be deemed illegal. I don't want to get into the legal aspects of things, but we basically were asking and probing and things like that. If we were to physically do something, garbage dump or I'm sorry, garbage dive or something like that, yeah, we're just gathering information. Now we're at the point of using that information with enumeration. And enumeration is just the process of actually trying to find or gain access into a system. So we gathered all this information through scanning. Now we're using it. And now we're at a very dangerous point in the course and in the material. If you do not have permission to test a machine, to evaluate a machine, to do anything, and you start enumerating onto this machine, you start trying to probe and you start breaking into this machine, you are breaking the law, right? If you are a white hat hacker and you are working for a organization, then you need to have clear defined rules of engagement. You have to have all those ducks in a row because we are now at the point where we may enter a machine or compromise a machine or do something to a machine that we don't have permission to do. So whenever I practice this or whenever I do the demonstrations on this, I'm doing it in that test environment that I have available to students if they want to build it at home. I have never done any of these techniques in the wild because if I'm not careful and I do it in the wild and the IDSs go off, it could be interpreted as a belligerent attack, right? And I can get into serious trouble. So again, don't do any of this stuff in the wild. You have to be extremely careful. Set up your test environments, check out the YouTubes, do your labs, but definitely do not do any of this in the wild on live machines. So with that being said, let's do the first part of enumeration, where we're just going to gather information and we're going to gather that information and we're going to store it. And then we're going to use the information to really do the nasty stuff. All right. All right, so I'm up on my machine here, and I'm on my Kali machine, and I'm not going to go through previous material like we did before, do some quick things. We do a scan for life, and if I do an nmap, touch my screen, sorry. Make sure the screen is active. I do an nmap-sp. I'm going to do a ping scan, and I'm going to do it on the first 10 computers in my network. You saw me do this on several different videos. And again, this is just so we kind of walking through those steps really quickly. We can see we have a couple hosts out there. Now, the host that I'm curious about, that I've done all that scanning and all the, blood in the water type things, is that host that is residing at 10.0.0.4, right? So we have a nice little target there. Let's gather information, but more importantly, as we gather the information, let's really document that particular information. Now, I will speed up the video a little bit because some of the scans do take a little bit longer. One of the scans I'm going to do, let me clear this screen and start from the top. One of the scans I'm going to do, oh, I'll do it in a second. The utilities that we're using, nmap and some of the more aggressive forms of nmap, you have to be the root user or you have to be the pseudo user to do it. If I try some of these, it's going to say, even though I'm Callie and I may be in the administrator group, I may not have privileges. So if I try this, and this one's fairly benign, you've seen me do that one before with the -SP, but if I start doing something like SV, where I'm asking those devices for their version, and I say, tell me everything on any open port, and give me all 65,535 ports on the machine 10.0.0.4. So this nmap is basically saying do a very verbose scan. The V doesn't mean verbose here. It means find me all the versions of the programs that are running on any of the open ports. Let's scan all 65,535 ports here. Let's see what happens. So it's going to take a little bit of time. All right, I sped up the video a little bit there because it basically took almost 3 to 4 minutes to do that initial scan. Because I did a version scan, it is telling me very specific versions of the programs that are running on those given ports. Now, what could have taken a couple seconds in the video took about 3 to 4 minutes. It's an extremely aggressive scan. I went through all 65,000 plus ports. It's providing a great wealth of information there. I may want to write this down. The other thing I would want to do is, if you remember, let me clear this screen here. If you remember, I ran, this basically did the three-way handshake, the TCP three-way handshake. Is there any other connection-oriented protocol that we may want to examine? Could there be ports that are open that are not using TCP? Maybe they're using the other connection-based protocol, UDP. So I'm going to do -SU, that's going to do a UDP scan, and I will do the given machine. Your requested a scan type which requires a root privileges. It's not allowing you to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a little sneaky here. Most Linux machines, first of all, they all have a root user, but they don't want you using that root user. They'll often create, like Callie, they'll create a user that is in the root group, but they're not the root user. The root user is the supreme being on that given machine. And you don't want to routinely use the root user to do your functions. But in this case, it's telling me, now I can do sudo, S-U-D-O, on all of this. Or what I can do is I can do a sudo -s. And what's that going to do? That's basically keeping me as Callie, elevating my privileges as root, and keeping me there. You'll see that I'm now in red versus blue. So let me clear the screen here and let me do the nmap -SU, the UDP scan, 10.0.0.4. Run through this. Okay, 10 minutes into the scan and I just can't take it anymore. Basically, it's going through 65 ports using some kind of EDP. I'm kind of chuckling here. I'm not going to spend 10, 20 minutes on just exposing a couple ports there. So let's press on. So What I next want to do, and the whole premise of this video was just to gather the information, and then now we want to keep that information. We want to report on that information so we can use it for enumeration. So I'm going to go back and clear my screen from this monstrosity, and I'm going to say nmap. And this time I'm going to be a little aggressive. I'm going to use that big A to be a little aggressive. I'm going to say go after 4, make it verbose, but this time output the information not to the screen, but to a file. And we're going to send it to an XML file. We could, if you want to be a little Linuxy, we could send it to a greppable file, a file that we can read with grep or anything like that. I want to send it to an XML because I could also use the next program I'm going to use is I'm going to convert that XML file to an HTML file that I can use as a potential report. So let me run this. Doing the scan, doing that very, very aggressive scan. And now instead of just spitting it to the screen, it is creating an XML file that we can use. This should be a little quicker than that UDP scan. You guys saw that UDP scan and fast forward. I actually had to sit here. If you're curious, the little watch that I was using, a little stopwatch I picked up on eBay a few years ago. This is a former Soviet Union stopwatch. If you ever want to see it or pictures of it, it has the CCCP, which was the former Soviet Union. Alrighty, and so we're done with the scan, and you can see that we have an XML file. Now what I want to do is I want to take that XML file. I'm going to clear my screen again, and I'm going to convert it to an HTML file, so I'll be able to open up with a browser. Kali has a nice little tool to do that. It's called XLSTproc. You can see that I've done this before. Desktop, or the location of that file. Spell it right, Nick. Desktop, do scan 1. -O just means... Try it again. -O means output it, and output it to a HTML file. I hit some wrong keys there. All right. So now if I go, and you can see that I put this all to the desktop, there's my XML file, but there's my HTML file. And if I open it with any web browser, give it a second. My machine's a little slow because a lot of stuff is running in the background because I'm videoing it and all this other stuff. Give it a second. It should pop up. If you look up here, here's my CPU utilization for this given virtual machine. Now, this is a nice little report that if you're doing ethical hacking, if you're doing white hat hacking, you could potentially give to your employer, your customer, whatever. It provides given details. It basically did this nmap and put it out, nmap-a, put it out to a file. That's what it's telling you. The time that it ran. But more important is the content that's within this file. And we will use some of this content in the next video to enumerate. Again, enumeration is that process of now actually seeing if we can get into that machine. Can we grab credentials to get in the machine? Or maybe they did something, the individual who set up that machine did something that we can just kind of walk through. So let's go on to the next video.